Right, this is another video that I've effectively been asked to make by quite a lot of people, really. Or a lot of people showed interest in me talking about this subject anyway. So you'll have to excuse me because I've probably got water dripping down me and stuff like that because I've just been running around in this house, cleaning it all a bit more. All carpets are out now, everything's out, so I'm just going around every room, hoovering everything. As you can see, I need to get in here before decorators come in and sort all that stuff. So been putting more stuff in skip, so I'm a little bit frazzled, and Spark's in doing some work as well. So if you hear any drilling and stuff like that, that's what's going on there. But hopefully it won't be too intrusive. But yeah, so let's take a second, and I probably should have waited a bit before pressing record actually, but it's alright, we can ease into it like that, it's fine. So as I say, I've had quite a lot of messages expressing thanks really for the things I've been talking about, specifically I think around mental health and ADHD and things like that. And people are interested in my experiences dealing with it basically. And so what I plan to do, and again I find it a fascinating subject myself. So as part of whatever's happening now, whatever's snowballing, I'm gonna be talking about this sort of stuff a lot. Now, predominantly talking, of course, from my own experience, and not ever trying to sound like an authority on anything, because the only thing I'm an authority on is me and how I've responded to ADHD or whatever, and how I've dealt with it. But not only how I've dealt with it as a person, how I've dealt with it as a person in the music industry, which is an incredibly brutal, cutthroat industry anyway. And not only that, there's all sorts of other things that being in that industry with an illness like mine, or like ADHD, which affects a lot of people, and we'll talk about that. It's a difficult thing to adjust to, and that'll play into things we'll talk about as well. And as I've said previously, I'm more than willing to talk about this sort of stuff. A lot of people are praising me and saying I'm brave and things like that, but I honestly I don't. The only reason I find talking about things like this difficult is because I suppose I get embarrassed maybe about getting upset, but not that much. I don't really care anymore about that. But it's more confronting feelings, I think, more than anything. So I suppose that's why people are saying I'm brave, I guess, because it's a brave thing to do, to confront feelings head on like that. But that's something I've always tried to do. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about ADHD then. And this is the one time I have made a few notes, whether they're going to come in handy. Well, the first thing I'll say is understood and under control ADHD is not a big deal, really, if it's understood and under control. It's something that affects millions of people. I don't know any stats or anything like that. I'm not that kind of guy. I just know from my own experience, and know that I can't be the only one, that a lot of people must have been, and still are in the situation that I was in. So yeah, but understood, I say treated, but yeah, understood and under control. It doesn't have to be something that destroys your life. It doesn't at all. So not tackled is where the problem really exists. Again, speaking from my own experience, because obviously if it's not seen and dealt with, then the individual will develop their own coping mechanisms and coping strategies. Sometimes that will be perfectly fine and acceptable maybe, but sometimes they won't, and it's more often than not anything like ADHD or anything like that. it can affect, well, obviously it affects your behaviour, and often in a negative way, or certainly for people around you. You know, a lot of the times when you're in the throes of it, it's not as hard for you as it is for people around you. It does become later, but when you're in the real throes of it, it's almost like a ride, I guess. And it's only afterwards that you kind of reflect on things. So let's see if this sheet of paper here is really going to be much use to me. Yeah, so I think, so one of the biggest problems, as I see it, and this plays into my own experience again, is ADHD not being recognised in children at the right age. Now again, I don't know, well, I can spot it, but anyway, I don't know, I'm saying these things in an ideal world. In an ideal world, every mental illness, and especially something like ADHD, is something that should be looked out for like hawks, if anyone really cares about anyone in society. You know, and it certainly wasn't when I was at school. Because, okay, let's talk about that. So kids at school with undiagnosed ADHD or autism or anything that is around a similar spectrum that affects behaviour, and often in unacceptable behaviour for other people, all those sorts of things. Children who have those things that are in school systems that aren't looking, it's very difficult, again I'm talking in an ideal world, but that aren't directly looking out for these things. These children get left behind. I suppose left behind is a bit of a cliche phrase, but think about it. If you have a child in a classroom, and they don't always have to be bad, do you know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be trying to beat someone up or something, or throwing a chair at a teacher, although those things will also be part of it. But, you know, people who interrupt too much, and when you're that young, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, well, I suppose it must be so difficult to spot in children, really, because of the things that children go through anyway, and the stages of behaviour and stuff. But anyway, the problem is, if children get into a pattern of negative behaviour without any insight from, well, the parent or the teacher into the real situation that the child's in, it's a terrible situation, that, and it breaks my heart, because it makes me really, really angry as well, because there must be millions of children being sent to the bedrooms by the parents all the time for behaviour, being sent to the headmaster's office all the time because of the behaviour. You know, when all the time it's not really their fault. Now again, I don't talk about ADHD or anything like that as some sort of, oh, well, I've got ADHD so I can behave how I want. That's not what it is, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it gives you any sort of shield against judgment, because that everyone has to accept that you've got an illness so you do these things. That's rubbish. Obviously, that's rubbish. Because while I or someone with ADHD can't help their behaviour, the negative side of their behaviours shouldn't necessarily be encouraged, if you know what I mean. And the problem is, when kids are punished for bad behaviour that's really just a symptom of ADHD, you are effectively rewarding their own coping mechanism. That's how I see it anyway. You're fueling the fire of what's going on or not going on in the right way inside their minds. You know, and that's the problem with life, isn't it, really? Because, again, like I'm saying, it's one thing to say, look, don't treat your child like that because they have a real problem that you can't see. It's one thing to say that to a parent or a teacher. It's another thing to be that parent or that teacher stood dealing with that behaviour, because, again, that's something I know all about. Seeing the look on people's face, people close to me, seeing the look on their faces at times, it's not fair to them. And that's why I've effectively taken myself off for a long time and been a recluse, because I've never been able to cope with the judgment of my behaviour. And I almost to the point where I don't even want people to know my name, because if they don't know my name or know my face, they can never talk about me and say, oh, well, yeah, he's this or he's that, or he makes people feel this. Do you know what I mean? It's terrible, really. And all it takes is for someone, when you're in the throes of it or talking about how you feel and how you're affected by it, all it takes is for someone to understand and go, you know, that must be tough, that. You know, they don't have to say it in some profound way, put their arm around you and say, I sympathise with you, I'm really sorry. Just a basic level of, you know, I feel for you there, mate, that must be sort of tough to deal with. So, not tackled. Yeah, well, again, so let's go, talking about the kids and behaviour. You know, kids are labelled naughty or whatever, and, you know, put in certain... The trouble is, again, I'm talking only from what I think. I could be totally wrong, and I apologise if I am. But mainstream schooling, they're doing the best anyway, and especially now, but they're doing the best anyway. So it's very difficult if you have a child in a classroom that does have these problems, that makes it difficult for everyone else to learn. Then that's a problem in it, because it's terrible to take that child out of the classroom and put them in a classroom with other children that struggle to learn. Because people with those issues, they need to grow up with people who reflect on their behaviour, which are their peers. Do you know what I mean? And especially if their behaviour is noticed and dealt with and the right aspects are nurtured. A child with ADHD or bipolar or anything, autism or anything like that, being around, and I'm not going to use the word normal, but do you know what I mean? Being in a class full of other children that have the tools that they don't, that's very important, I think. I don't know, kids are cruel, aren't they? I don't know, you see what I'm saying anyway. You see the point I'm trying to make. You have kids labelled naughty, and also, right, so my ADHD wasn't spotted till I was 27. I'm not going to talk about that too much, how I feel about that. But you also have a lot of adults. You know, adults being diagnosed, or adults who've never been diagnosed as a kid and have gone through the life building coping mechanisms, developing what they believe is their life, and running with that. So when you have naughty children, what happens when you have a naughty adult? Like, effectively criminal, I suppose, is the simplest term you'd use. So you see what I'm saying? This cycle starts so early. It starts so early that, do you know what I mean? It's a ball that once you start, it's a really heavy one as well. So once you push it, you're not going to stop it. It's not something you can put your foot on and simply expect it to stop rolling. Do you know what I mean? And as an analogy I use a lot, it will become a storm that will blow through your life. And all you will be able to do is put a jacket on and sit there and wait for it to go. Because if you stand there and try and blow it out, you're gonna look silly, because who stands in front of a storm trying to blow it out? And I've experienced that a lot in my life. I've experienced people trying to effectively blow me out. Do you know what I mean? As a storm, and it's not a wise thing to do. So, if you don't have a good support network and issues like this are not spotted early in life, because if they are, there really is no problem. And even in later life, it can be dealt with. But if they're not spotted, then what you have when you get to adulthood is someone who's already on a path, unless, like I said, support networks and other things, will be on a path to a life of crime, or a life that they know that they built through their experiences with society and their reactions to people in society and stuff. You know, I've done it a million times. Reacted to things and made people, you know what I mean? And I just thought, I didn't even know why. I didn't even know why I did that. So that goes on to other things. These notes are working quite well, actually. Thanks for the advice. Mind you, that were a lot of people. Right. Yeah. Yeah, so... that's interesting, yeah. So, yeah, once you're into adulthood, well, I mean, let's face it, right? At least when you're a child, there's some chance of someone going, hang on, this isn't right, so let's, come on, let's have a look at this. When you're an adult, especially if you're an adult that's already developed these coping mechanisms, and let's face it, right? So a lot of people with ADHD will abuse drugs. Now, whether that, I'm going to go as far as to say that's true of anyone with any mental illness, but especially ADHD, they'll abuse drugs, alcohol, smoking. They will indulge the things that, effectively keep the mind occupied enough to not fall, well, you know what I'm saying. And that, speaking to my psychiatrist when I was diagnosed, Parsley and stuff, I don't know if I want to talk about that in this video, but no, because it plays a role, but I'm not using the real word. But again, anyone who's not watched the other video, you should know what Parsley is. My psychiatrist said, well, you've been self-medicating with that, and it's one of the most common things of anyone with ADHD is they'll gravitate to cannabis. I use the word, but you know what I'm saying. They'll gravitate to it as a coping mechanism, as self-medication. Now, what do you think that causes in a brain like mine? I'm not a criminal. I ain't got a criminal element inside me. But from the age of 18, I needed cannabis, and so I got it however I needed to, and that made me feel like a criminal, and a lot of people made me feel like a criminal for that. And again, if I wasn't quite so sensible and ultimately balanced despite a lot of problems, that could have got people hurt. I'm not being funny, could have got people hurt, could that sort of talk. Because it's like, look, you're not inside my brain, so don't you dare for even a split second attempt to judge things through your eyes in the same way that I do through mine. You don't have the right. You have no context. It's like my parents effectively trying to tell me how to live my life. They have no right to do that, other than the fact that they created me or whatever. They have no right to give me life advice, other than saying, well, when I was that age and things were like this is what I did. But, God knows about now, because we live in a different era. By the way, I'm not saying that my parents would or have. I'm just saying that it will be like that. It will be like my parents trying to tell me how to live my life. Because I guess there must be still people who have parents who try to tell them how to live their lives, even at 37 years old or older. That's frightening, that. But everyone's entitled to their own relationship with their own family. I'm never going to be one to pass any kind of judgment on that. I just have a problem with that. I have a problem with people who think it's okay to tell me what I should and shouldn't be doing, thinking, saying, behaving. I have a real problem with that. A real problem with that. And that's when you'll see the nasty side of me. Because no one has a right. No one has a right. They just don't have a right. Anyway, they can certainly say, look, how you behave makes me feel like this because of this. But they can't say you need to stop doing that and stuff. Talk about a red rag to a bull. You'll make it worse. And I'll flatten you. But you see, and this is how thought processes work, because that's, for a long time now, that has been my sword in the stone, anger. Do you know what I mean? But as a wise man once said, anger is a gift if it's channeled right. If it's channeled right. Just like ADHD, autism, it's a gift if you channel it right and you see it at the right time. Because if you don't, it's a time bomb. It's a time bomb for that person being in prison or dead through God knows what sort of drug abuse. That's what you're looking at. And again, it's only the fact that I had fantastic parents, a fantastic childhood and fantastic management that I'm still probably here and didn't, lows can be quite low. As millions of people know. So again, right, okay, this is interesting. Gateway drugs. You like that term? I don't. Anyway, gateway drugs. Let's talk about gateway drugs. The term gateway drug, in my opinion, well, again, I have to watch how fast I start running here. Right, gateway drugs. I've used Parsley since I was 18. I've never touched anything else in my entire life. Nothing. Never had any interest in it either. I think I always had a hyper focus on Parsley and what it allowed me to do creatively and how it allowed me to reflect on it. Don't get me wrong, it has its negative side effects, of course it does, but let me tell you something, it's not lethargy and memory loss, not with something like me. It might be with some people, not to a mind like mine. All it does with a mind like mine is gets it on a nice even keel. It doesn't put it like that, do you know what I mean? It doesn't. And that is another video, that people's misunderstanding of Parsley. You know what I'm saying? People's misunderstanding of it. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm not stood here saying anything other than there is no blanket way to look at this. It's not black and white as much as the government, well, as much as a lot of people would want to believe. And I know there are people out there who've had experiences with their children starting to smoke cannabis, let's drop that, starting to smoke cannabis at a young age, at a very young age, before the mind is developed. You know, I'm talking people who start smoking cannabis at 11, 12, 13, 14. That is terrifying. And in my opinion, that is when it's most dangerous. You know, I didn't even look at it or touch it till I was 18. And even that in reality is too young because your brain is not finished developing. But the reality of cannabis is some minds can take it and some minds can't. Some people can have a lot of it and go into Greg's and buy some and you won't have a clue. And one of them will be me. Do you know what I mean? Back then, you just won't know. You have no idea unless you really decided to get your own edging. Do you know what I'm saying? But did I get onto this right? Yeah, I did. See, these notes are helping. Yeah. Well, yeah. You know, and you. So yeah, you can have drugs that don't affect everyone in the same way. You know, in the same way that COVID-19 doesn't affect everyone in the same way. So people who run around saying this and saying that it does this to everyone is stupid. But at the same time, like I say, you do have parents who have lost children and they will put it down to cannabis and they might very well be right because some minds can't process it. But more than that, I think, and again, I'd never try and, I'm not casting judgment or anything, but I think started smoking something that potent nowadays at such a young age, sort of before 16, even, you know, like 12, 11, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, I don't have children or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure that the age that people are that are using drugs, not just cannabis, is getting lower and lower. It's terrifyingly so. I think there's a rise in drug culture in children of epidemic proportions, really. More so cocaine and stuff, probably. I don't know, I'm no expert, or even whatever. But, so, you know, so I'm never going to preach about cannabis. I'm never going to be one who stood at the other side saying, legalise it, everyone should be on it. Not in a million years would I say that, never. And I have more than a lot of respect and sympathy for mothers who've lost sons to suicide through effectively smoking cannabis at such a young age. It did warp the mind and cause things like schizophrenia. Now, cause schizophrenia is I shouldn't have said that. It will, if you are predisposed to mental illness, cannabis can, well, it's believed that it can trigger that. But again, I would caveat that with saying that that's only in some people. Look, I think there's some people who could have one dragon on the joint or one joint and that's enough because the brain, a tiny little bit of science on it is it's effectively to do with how many receptors you have in your brain, cannabinoid receptors or whatever, but If you have a lot, you're all right, and if you don't have that many, a little bit will affect you a hell of a lot. That's the very basic skim science of it anyway. So that's why someone can take loads of it and be absolutely fine, and then another person, it could cause all sorts of problems. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into the ins and outs of cannabis. What I was using that as a point to make a point about gateway drugs. And what I was going on about when I was talking about gateway drugs was, I have a little theory of my own that, again, people in the throes of ADHD at the right age, without the right support network, they are the people who are susceptible to gateway drugs. They are the people that probably make up the statistics that that people love to start quoting when you talk about gateway drugs. Because I'm living proof it doesn't have to be that way, because I've never touched overdose and I've never had an interest in touching anything else. But it goes back to kids not being recognised as having an issue, going through to still not being recognised as an adult, developing criminal behaviour, going out nicking cars and stuff, robbing houses because it's what the brain's telling him to do, and they might have got in with the wrong crowd. That's another problem. You have someone with issues like mine, you put them in with the wrong crowd, that's a bad scenario. That's a bad scenario. How long is this? We're looking at 25 minutes. I'm glad I'll press record. I'll be going anyway. So effectively, like I say, these gateway drugs, this criminal behaviour, this naughty behaviour as a child, all these things that they're indulging themselves in are self-coping mechanisms, effectively. And so one of the biggest things that anyone needs, not just someone with a mental illness, anyone here, is insight into their own character. In my opinion, it's the most important thing anyone as a human being can ever have, is insight into their own character. You might have insight, look at yourself and stand there and go, yeah, I'm like that, but I don't give a... But you still need to have insight. If you've got that insight, if you do decide to make a change, you can. Because obviously, as anyone knows, the first part of making any sort of change, especially behavioural, is noticing that you're doing it. And it doesn't matter how many people tell you you're doing it, you have to know you're doing it. So insight into your own situation is crucial. And again, but it's very difficult for kids, and even 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, even 18, hopefully by 15, 16, I would think that insight is something that you should be capable of, or should be something that's starting to form, is a view of your own, a holistic view of your own psyche, effectively. You might not realise that's what it is, but simply by knowing I'm not going there, if I go there it'll make me feel like that, and I can't be bothered feeling like that for 6 weeks. Do you know what I mean? But it's brilliant there. Progress though, innit? Can't moan about drilling because it's progress and everything, but nice new light. Bloody hell, it's like the sun. Nice new lights in here. All wiring sorted, had a proper safety test, had a brand new consumer unit put in, all the latest technology on that, do you know what I mean? It's coming on now, is this place, it's coming on. So, 28, self-coping mechanisms, insight. I suppose insight into yourself, but also people need insight into you, teachers, your parents. If I can save, or not save, you know what I'm saying? If I can help one parent, or one child, or one teenager have insight in, or start to have even a basic understanding of something they've just been diagnosed with, I'd go to the ends of the earth to do that. I would. I'd go to the ends of the earth to do that. Because I like helping people, and I have a lot of experience in this from a young age, doing very stressful things, like being an internationally, an international musician at one stage, and getting on planes and stuff. Can you imagine what that was like for me? So with my problems, getting on planes, but I knew I had to do it. Because I could never let the other three down. I could never say, look, I'm so terrified about getting on that plane, we can't do that at all. I never do that. I would have never done that. I did what I needed to do to get through those flights. Some were better than others, and some I went into them with a better frame of mind than others. But some of them nearly ended me. Do you know what I mean? Some of those flights. Oh, that's a bad thought process. So let's move on from that insight. Right, okay. So again, this is going to be the first in a few of these, depending on how my brain decides to put it out. But I suppose the last thing I want to say in this video is ADHD is not one thing, right? I mean, it is labelled as one thing, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's labelled as one thing. You can't look that up on the internet and find out what it is, regardless of anyone telling you that you can. You can't. Because what it is irrelevant. It's what it does that is the problem. And as I say, if it's tackled and it doesn't do it, it doesn't cause a problem, which is behavioural difficulties. Because one thing that will start to happen with people with a lack of insight is, you will spiral. You will spiral because and it's the ADHD that started the spiral, but it's certainly not the thing that's making it continue. It can be sorted, but people, it's very difficult for someone in a reality to accept that there's another, but there always is, and it could be tomorrow. Do you know, that reality could be tomorrow, literally for anyone. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say ultimately. ADHD is not one thing, it's broad, but it's more the behaviours the sufferer develops to cope with, which is a real problem, and that's kind of what I wrote there. And I think that's the strongest message really, because I imagine too many parents especially, or teachers, or schools, or whatever, universities, are too willing to look at a face value understanding of the terms used to describe ADHD and look just for that, which is a waste of time. You know what I mean? Because people who don't really know anything about it, you think they'd look at me and say I've got a lack of concentration. Some of the stuff that I put myself into and learn about in the space of time that I learn it in. Anyway, the point being, this sort of stuff harnessed is a gift. It's not a problem. It's not a reason to send your kid to bed early, do you know what I mean? Or send a kid out of a classroom. Harness it, learn how to harness it, and turn it into something that matters, and not something that's going to destroy your life. Because if you let it, it will. It will. So, I think that's about enough for this one, because I think I've made the points I wanted to make. And thanks to my handy bit of paper here. So yeah, I'll tell you what, right? No more comments about my outfit. I wear this and a few others because I got to the barbers yet. And to be honest, I've worked out that I can just chop it off and wear this, it doesn't matter anyway. Anyway, I have 10 of these, 10 black ones, 10 blue ones, and I have about 3 pairs of jeans. Everything's on rotation, I'm not constantly wearing the same clothes. Anyway, so I hope this video helps someone. I'll tell you something, it's helped me, because I've come to a couple of conclusions while making it and writing that I hadn't necessarily come to earlier. So yeah, I hope this video helps someone. I hope to people who are still watching after 33 minutes and probably going to be about 50 seconds, thank you very much for watching, and thanks for watching everything that I'm doing, and thanks for getting on this journey that I'm going on. Thanks for being on it with me. It means everything to me, and there's going to be more to follow. Lots more to follow. Nice one. Speak to you soon.